With today's topic, you can just imagine the choir's had a lot of fun. I keep telling them, no giggling. Actually, the most salacious thing in the sermon is from the Bible, so there you go. What is it about human beings that compels us to seek out the company of other humans? What is it within us, mere mortals, that fires in us a passion for communion with God, with something bigger than ourselves? What is it within our bones and our muscles and our sinew that propels us into the arms of another person? Is it simply animalistic programming, an instinct that's built into all mammals, or is something else going on here? Would you be surprised if I told you that all of these questions have the same spark of life at their heart? And would you believe me if I told you that all of this stems from how we view our relationship with the Holy One? That yearning to belong to someone or something is mighty, and it drives much of our very human behavior. Today in our work with the virtue and the vice, we're exploring that naughtiest of mortal sins, lust. Or more correctly, we're trying to see if the negative judgment of lust is, in reality, something more positive that got twisted and changed into something else. In his book, The Virtue and the Vice, Reverend Dr. Robin Myers makes the case that lust is the transactional element of sex. We reduce people to their base desires, and then we judge them based on that, instead of the whole of the person. He writes this: with our Western mechanistic view of sex as a purely physical form of competition with winners and losers, no wonder we end up using one another like steroids. The ancient understanding that lust as the indiscriminate consumption of the other for purely selfish pleasure has to do with physical gratification. And today we have reworked the definition of lust to fit the age of narcissism. Intimacy is the goal of any relationship. Vulnerability, empathy, consistency. These are the hallmarks of people who want to have and sustain good, healthy relationships. And some of those relationships will be more intimate than others, and I'm not talking about sexual intimacy necessarily, but rather a soul-filled spiritual intimacy, a connection where two people acknowledge some sort of shared energy, some connection between them. Sometimes it may lead to a sexual relationship, but more often than not, it strengthens the bonds already there. It shines a light on a love that transcends our senses. And it fills us with chemicals that makes us feel good. And that's a lot of what I'm talking about this morning, chemicals. One of my favorite professors at Phillips Seminary once commented about her son, who was soon to enter puberty, and she said to us, "This sweet little boy that I taught to tie his shoes, who loves nature and who is so open and loving and kind, is about to become an angry, confused, oppositional teenager." And all because of hormones. Hormones are those chemicals that act on our body's cells and tissues and make them do things like mature us into adults. It makes sense to me to blame our sensual desires on hormones because that's the job of many of these hormones, to turn us into creatures that can reproduce. That's how evolution has worked in this regard. How best to ensure the propagation of humanity? Hormones. They act upon the body, causing rapid changes in physical form. Our very human bodies mature, and then the simple egg and the simple sperm cells gear up and try to find each other. That's what's happening here. A sperm cell is seeking out an egg cell. But it's these same hormones that act upon the brain and make it want to reject the company of the family because evolution dictates that we reproduce with someone not of our same genetic profile. For the family line to continue as physically healthy humans, we need to seek mates outside of our community. Hormones act on our teenage brain and say, "Run away, get out of the house." Not because the teen doesn't love her family, but because hormones are acting on her brain and telling her it is now time to seek a mate in another village, very far from dear old mom and dad. Does that help explain any of your teenager's behavior or any of your teenage behavior? The next time that you think that your teenager doesn't love you, remind yourself he is filled with hormones and he is out of his mind with chemically induced lust. A lust that will drive him away from his parents and into someone else's arms. It's natural and it's okay. What was once seen as wild, untamed, and animalistic behavior in the ancient world has since come to be understood as this chemically induced puberty or madness that humans go through to mature into adults. The next time you read one of the Apostle Paul's letters and you run into one of his exhortations about childhood or thinking like a child, superimpose that with the coming chaos of the teenage mind and how Paul equates that with untamed, wild, and disordered people. To Paul, to have lust was to be in that state of animalistic desire, and that did not fit in the ordered society. It certainly didn't fit in the proper Jewish community either. It was something of our youth to be put away when we reached maturity. The Hebrew Bible says much about the sin of lust and has many remedies to return the offender, the one with lust in her heart, back into covenant with the Holy One and thereby with the community. The original meaning of the term lust in Hebrew has changed over time. In the Hebrew language, lust originally meant strong desire, a neutral quality that can be good or bad. Over time, it has developed the more negative meaning that we apply today. Strong sexual desire that is wrong, bad, or evil. The ancient Greeks knew that love and desire was complicated. So they have numerous terms for different kinds of love. Some of you might remember this from Sunday school. Agape is one of them. It's kind of a parental love. Agape love is what the Holy One might feel for us when serving in a parental role, such as asking Cain where his brother is, or commanding Adam and Eve not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. But the Greeks knew that that definition doesn't work for other types of love, so we get another term, philia, which means brotherly love, a more congenial love. Think Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, or any term that ends in philia. Bibliophile, that's one who loves books, or an Anglophile, that's one who loves all things English, etc., etc., etc. And of course, we had to have a word for a more sensual love, and that is the word eros, from which we get the term erotic. Don't forget, the Greek Empire, even though in decline, it had a significant effect on the culture of all of the Mediterranean world during this time. Greek or Hellenistic philosophy and thought can be seen in most of the writings in the Hebrew Bible and in the Christian Testament. And their ideas about love and sensuality permeate throughout them as well. Now, I don't know if you noticed yet, but the traditional word this morning is pretty salacious. Did you know that the Bible has some pornographic moments in it? Well, it does in places. And nowhere is it more explicitly sensual than in the Song of Solomon. Let's hear now the words of the ancient Jewish writer. Now, mind you, I didn't choose the most salacious passage to read, as I would blush. I'm curious, Robin, how many people are going to read Song of Solomon today? Already are on their phones. All right. So I'm going to rate this passage. I'm going to read PG, 13, maybe R. Here now, these ancient, naughty words. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabbin. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Can't you feel the sensuality of those images? We are sensual beings. We exist in this world through the use of our senses. And some of those senses have an intimate quality. And it is in that intimacy, that closeness, that trust, that is where we are vulnerable. And it is in this moment of vulnerability where we might be changed. Being changed is scary business. Paying attention to our senses, our sensuality, is far more terrifying than change. So how do we square the sensuality of the Song of Solomon with the strict laws in the Hebrew Bible regarding sexual behaviors? And of all the things to borrow or steal from the Jewish people, why did that developing group of Christ-following Jews choose to keep those draconian laws, the ones dealing with sensuality, and overlook so many of the others? An article I was preparing for the sermon said this: the growing influence of a Christianity that had imported Hebrew Bible prohibitions and that understood sexual pleasure as contrary to virtue made sexual behaviors easy targets for prohibition. We humans love to gossip, and what's better than salacious gossip about our most intimate secrets? Ironically, the same desire for belonging that gives us the drive to communicate, to gossip, is that same desire that drives us into each other's arms. We crave belonging so much, whether it's part of a group gossiping and having fun, or a couple in bed frolicking. We have this puritanical attitude towards the sensual world that says, enjoy, but not too much. Touch, but only in proper ways. Love, but not too deeply. In our modern culture, sex sells, and we throw all of those old, moldy prohibitions from the Pilgrims out the window, and we replace them with a sort of devil-may-care attitude towards all things sexual. So Robin Myers, in this book, he goes on and he asks this question: how does one recover a healthy and holy view of our human sexuality from the sexual dysfunction of our time? How can we be both erotic, filled with eros, and faithful creatures? I think Robin Myers could have asked that question in first century Palestine, and it would have felt very authentic to them. The Romans, as pagans, which, by the way, I need to untangle that word even more for us because there's a lot in that word. But the Romans, as pagans, they held a different view on sex. One that still valued self-control, but allowed vast more opportunities to lose control on occasion safely. And it is those occasions that our Jewish ancestors were so strident about proving how different Jews are and what animals those pagans are. Sexual practices were an excellent way to create a category of other. Still are, aren't they? What did Jesus say about sex? Well, not much. A few affiliated scriptures have him mostly decrying divorce, and the primary sex act mentioned is fornication with another man's wife, or the desire to do that. So adultery and divorce, those bedrock challenges regarding a marriage, these are the things on which Jesus focuses on in the regard of sex. And the prevailing attitude in Jesus' day was this: if your appetites were unhealthy, Any sort of inebriation or passion is out of control. Anything that evoked an untamed spirit, this was seen as a sign of weakness. And a man or woman who had such desire for sex that they sought pleasure outside of the marital bed was obviously someone who did not have their emotions and passions under control. This loss of control was a significant social sin. Therefore, most of the laws and moral strictures of the time deal with behaviors that follow from the loss of control. Humans are to keep themselves well ordered, their households well ordered, and then the empire would be well ordered. The emperor is on his throne, and all is right with the world. One of the most fascinating readings I encountered on sensuality and sex came from Maya Angelou, the esteemed poet, and how she responded to the criticism of the brutal portrayal of rape and her liberating stances on sexuality in her brilliant book, I Know Why the Caged Birds Sing. In this discussion, she began talking about appetites and asking, why can't a woman have the same appetites as a man, including sexual appetites? There's a double standard in our bedrooms. Men come out of the bedroom as conquerors or sexual superiors, as studs or ladies' men, especially when they're speaking of multiple partners. Women are called whores for the exact same behavior. Maya Angelou biographer Mary Jane Lupton wrote this about the icon: as a woman who loves men, Maya Angelou is very open about her sexual feelings, making almost no effort to conceal her inclinations. She craves sex, but she likes being satisfied. She is neither passive nor timid in approaching men. She is, in her words, a healthy woman with a healthy appetite. Angelou has taken her desire, put it in an ordered frame that makes sense for her. She has removed the barriers that held her back. And she was teaching us one way that we can be whole human beings. And as Robin Myers reminds us, as long as we put sex and soul in different compartments, a deafening silence descends between them. One seems too kinky, the other too pious. But sex is too important to be blushed off the page or pushed to the margins of our common life. The whole person recognizes their appetites and deals with them honestly. That is a whole and holy spiritual sensuality, a holy eros. Robin Myers had some parting words on the topic of eros and lust. With this lively virtue, holy eros, everything about sex becomes more nuanced, more sophisticated, more subtle. Where we once submitted to the reciprocity of hormones, now we feast on the sweet alchemy of reciprocity itself. That is a sweet alchemy indeed. This is spiritual sex. This is holy eros. I pray that each of you can look at your sensuality, and by extension, your sexuality, and see it as a gift from God, not some curse to be managed, a gift from God to be received and given, shared at the right time and in the right spirit. Amen.